At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. Because, after all, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Johnny. Let's begin. When humanity finally made first contact, we committed both blasphemy and culinary genius in the same meal service. That takes a special kind of talent. A committee had designed the conference hall aboard the Stellaccord, which explained its resemblance to a hospital waiting room fused with a casino buffet. Neutral beige walls stretched toward a ceiling dotted with lights that flickered between warm and clinical. Long tables draped in unconvincing synthetic fabric filled the space, each one laden with samples of humanity's culinary offerings. Chef Antoine Tony Dubois surveyed his domain like a general before battle. His chef's whites were so crisp they seemed to have their own structural integrity, each button aligned perfectly with its counterpart. Beside him, his stepbrother Rex bounced on his heels. The flames on his custom chef's coat flickered in the uncertain light. "Stop fidgeting," Tony muttered, adjusting a garnish with tweezers. "You're agitating the hollandaise." "Hollandaise can bite me," Rex shot back, though he kept his voice low. "These alien food snobs are about to get a one-way ticket to Flavor Town, and you're worried about sauce anxiety?" Before Tony could deploy a carefully crafted insult, the main doors hissed open. The Clovian delegation entered with theatrical timing that suggested they'd waited outside for the perfect moment. If someone had tasked Tony with designing a species specifically to annoy him, they would have produced the Clovians. They were tall, willowy humanoids with delicate features that managed to look condescending even in repose. Their skin possessed a faint, pearlescent quality, and each sported a decorative crest above the brow that reminded Tony of the smaller dinosaurs from his grandmother's old movies. The skin on their necks, however, was another matter. It was normally smooth, but its texture could subtly shift and ripple, the surface roughening like fine grit, or smoothing to a glassy sheen with feeling in a display the briefing materials called a deeply ingrained emotional response. High critic Perrin led the group, the skin of his neck a smooth, placid texture that conveyed a practiced disinterest. He moved through the room as if doing them all a favor by existing in their presence. "Greetings," Perrin said, his voice a cultured baritone that turned every word into a subtle dismissal. The universal translator rendered his words flawlessly. "We arrive with great anticipation to sample what your species considers cuisine." Dr. Audra Bellwether, stationed at the corner table with her recording equipment, raised an eyebrow. She'd documented xenocultural exchanges for 15 years, and she could smell condescension across species barriers. Tony stepped forward, his smile sharp enough to fillet a salmon. "Welcome to our kitchen, High Critic. We've prepared a selection of Earth's finest dishes for your evaluation." Perrin's gaze swept across the assembled foods. A faint, dismissive roughening rippled across his neck. "How comprehensive. Though I must confess, the aroma is rather more aggressive than we anticipated. Is it customary for human food to announce its presence so boldly?" "Only the good stuff," Rex chimed in, sliding a plate forward. "Speaking of which, you've got to try these sliders. Grass-fed beef, caramelized onions, aged cheddar, and my special sauce." The High Critic examined the small burger as if it might attack him. With minute, exact movements, he lifted it, took the smallest possible bite, and chewed with the expression of someone performing complex mental arithmetic. The room fell silent. Tony held his breath. Perrin paused, his jaw working slowly. For a bare second, a brilliant, crystalline roughening ran across his neck before he visibly suppressed it. He set the remainder down and dabbed his thin lips with a napkin. "Fascinating," he finally said. "You've managed to create something that exists in an unfortunate space between sustenance and industrial byproduct. The layers of fat create a coating in the mouth reminiscent of petroleum products. The meat itself has been subjected to enough heat to destroy any subtlety it might have possessed, assuming it had any to begin with. A self-satisfied smoothness, like polished chrome spread across his throat. In short, it is an unsophisticated grease lump masquerading as nutrition. Rex's mouth fell open. Tony's left eye twitched. Behind her equipment, Dr. Bellwether typed notes. First contact, 0. Diplomatic incident, 1. This will be a long week. Look, I don't want to deep fry the pompous space turkey, Tony told the documentary camera, his arms crossed. They'd set up the interview station in a supply closet, forcing him to duck slightly to avoid the hanging light. But if someone happened to bread him and drop him in oil at 375 degrees, I wouldn't stop him. The interviewer, off camera, asked something about cultural sensitivity. Tony laughed, a sound without humor. Ha! Cultural sensitivity. They called my grandmother's recipe, a grease lump. In French culinary tradition, those are fighting words. The documentary cut to Rex, interviewed in what appeared to be a maintenance corridor. His sunglasses were pushed up on his head, and he gestured enthusiastically with a half-eaten donut. The thing about aliens, he said, powdered sugar dusting his goatee, is they think they're better than us because they figured out space travel first. But let me tell you something. You can master FTL travel and still not know jack about flavor profiles. That's just facts. The interviewer mentioned the Clovians' highly developed palates. Highly developed? Please, Rex snorted. You know what's highly developed? This donut. 3 kinds of chocolate, bacon bits, and a maple glaze that'll make you see God. That's development. These guys eat food like they're solving equations. The scene shifted to High Critic Perrin. Seated in an austere room the Clovians had somehow made even more beige than the rest of the ship. The skin on his neck remained a steady, muted smoothness, though the occasional flicker of texture across it betrayed a deeper feeling. The humans, he said, measuring each word, approach food with the subtlety of an asteroid impact. They seem to believe that if one flavor is good, a dozen must be better. Their chef, the loud one with the ridiculous hair, actually suggested I try something called donkey sauce. I can only assume it's made from actual donkeys. The interviewer clarified the sauce's true, donkey-free origins. A wave of rough texture, like coarse sand, washed over the skin on his neck. Surprise. Then why... Never mind. The point remains that human cuisine appears to be less about nourishment and more about assault. They have taken the act of eating, which should be a meditative contemplation of flavor and texture, and turned it into sport. Dr. Bellwether appeared next, having secured the captain's ready room for her interview. She sat behind the desk, fingers steepled and looking directly at the camera with the expression of someone who understood far too much. Anthropologically, she said, we're witnessing a fundamental clash between 2 completely different food philosophies. The Clovians view eating as art, ritual, and religious expression combined. Every meal is a performance. Humans, on the other hand, will eat anything if you put enough sauce on it. The interviewer asked if she thought the 2 cultures could find common ground. Bellwether's smile was thin. Oh, they'll find common ground. The foundation for it is already on the menu. The kitchen aboard the Stella Cord was a masterpiece of design for maximum chaos. 2 prep stations faced each other across a narrow aisle, close enough that the chefs could engage in hand-to-hand combat if necessary. The current situation made that seem increasingly likely. Absolutely not, Tony said, his knife moving in strokes as he deboned a chicken. We are not serving them wings. Why? Rex demanded, spinning a bottle of hot sauce like a gunslinger. Because they might actually enjoy them? Because we're trying to establish humanity as a serious culinary presence in the galaxy, not run a sports bar. Sports bars have culture. Sports bars have hepatitis. They glared at each other across the prep station. Between them, sous chef Maria quietly continued chopping vegetables, having long ago learned to avoid the space between the brothers during an argument. Listen, Rex said, setting down the hot sauce with exaggerated care. Your fancy food is great. Really. That thing you do with the foam and the little drops of sauce that look like modern art, chef's kiss. But these aliens need to understand human food is about joy. It's about getting your hands dirty. It's about, if you say Flavor Town, I'm going to hit you with this pan. The human experience, Rex finished, grinning. Which happens to have a postal code in Flavor Town. Tony raised the pan. Maria smoothly intercepted it. Gentlemen, she said in the tone of a veteran referee, might I suggest a compromise? The banquet is tomorrow. You could each prepare your signature chicken dish. Let the Clovians decide which better represents humanity. The brothers looked at each other. A slow smile spread across Rex's face. Tony's eyes narrowed. Fine, Tony said. But when they choose my ballotine over your carnival food, you're admitting on camera that technique matters. And when they go wild over my wings, you're wearing a Flavor Town t-shirt for the rest of the mission. They shook on it, each trying to crush the other's hand. Maria returned to her vegetables. I should have stayed in accounting, she muttered. While the kitchen descended into competitive cooking, Dr. Bellwether found herself in the Cultural Exchange Hall, a grandiose name for a conference room with pretensions. High Reverend Vemnon stood at the presentation screen, the skin on his neck a steady, pale smoothness that hadn't changed in 3 hours. Your species' religious framework is fascinating, Bellwether said, making notes on her tablet. The worship of the Valash as living gods? That's relatively unique in our database of known religions. Vemnon's head tilted slightly in acknowledgement. The Valash are not merely gods in your understanding of the term. They are the perfection of form, the apex of evolution. Before my people achieved consciousness, the Valash already ruled our world. We built our cities and our technology to protect us, but beyond those walls, they still rule. We are blessed to share a planet with divinity made flesh. Could you describe them for our records? The High Reverend's skin flickered, just for a moment, to a deeper smoothness. To describe the divine is to diminish it, but I will say this. They are power incarnate, scaled thunderlords who move with terrible grace. Their teeth can rend metal, their claws can score stone, and their eyes... He paused, and for the first time, Bellwether heard something that might have been fear in his voice. Their eyes see everything, past, present, and what might be. That's quite poetic, Bellwether said carefully. But from a biological standpoint. Biology cannot contain the divine, Dr. Bellwether. Your science would reduce them to mere animals. But they are so much more. They descended from the heavens in a rain of fire, chosen by the universe itself to test and purify my people. Bellwether's stillness was sudden and complete. Descended from the heavens? The ancient texts are quite clear. The Valash came from beyond, in the time before memory, when the world was young and my people were barely more than prey animals scurrying in the underbrush. Interesting. Bellwether's mind raced, connecting dots that formed a picture she didn't quite want to see yet. Would it be possible to view these ancient texts for comparative mythology purposes? Vemnon's skin snapped to a texture of sharp grit. Absolutely not. The sacred texts are not for outsider eyes. To even look upon the true form of the Valash without proper preparation is to invite madness. Of course, Bellwether said smoothly. I wouldn't want to cause offense. She needed to find someone with access to those texts. Someone younger, perhaps. Someone who viewed knowledge as something other than a tool for control. As if summoned by the thought, a younger Clovian appeared in the doorway. The skin of her neck was a vibrant pulsation of shifting textures, indicating excitement. Forgive the interruption, High Reverend, she said, though her eyes were on Bellwether. The kitchen staff is requesting clarification on dietary restrictions for tomorrow's banquet. Vemnon waved a dismissive hand. Handle it, Junior Archivist. I trust your judgment in mundane matters. The Junior Archivist, Idira, according to her badge, bowed slightly. But as she turned to leave, she caught Bellwether's eye, and made a tiny gesture with one hand. Later, it seemed to say, "We should talk." Bellwether gave an almost imperceptible nod. The game was on. The banquet hall had been transformed overnight. The sterile neutrality was now a careful balance between human and Clovian aesthetics. Soft lighting cast everything in warm gold, while holographic projections of both Earth and the Clovian homeworld slowly rotated above the diners' heads. The tables were set with a mixture of human china and Clovian utensils that somehow managed to complement each other. Tony stood at the service station, watching his ballotine rest under the heat lamps. He'd spent 6 hours on the preparation, carefully butterflying the chicken, laying in a stuffing of wild mushrooms and herbs, rolling it into a perfect cylinder. The sauce alone had taken 2 hours of careful reduction. Beside him, Rex lounged against the counter, an enormous tray of buffalo wings steaming in front of him. He'd gone all out. 3 different heat levels, 2 kinds of ranch, blue cheese, celery sticks, and what he called the nuclear option. Wings coated in a sauce made from Carolina Reapers that required protective equipment to prepare. "You're going to kill them," Tony said flatly. "Nah," Rex grinned. "Just gotta take them on a journey. First stop, Tangtown. Final destination, Flavor City." "That's not even the right..." Tony stopped and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You know what? Fine. When they're crying and their necks are on fire, don't come running to me." The Clovian delegation entered with their usual theatrics. Perrin's neckskin held a texture of fine, shifting grit that suggested polite interest. The other Clovians arranged themselves by some complex hierarchy that probably had to do with palate sophistication or the ability to sneer in multiple languages. "Honored guests," Tony began, stepping forward with a plate that looked more like art than food. "I present a deconstructed chicken palatine with a forest mushroom duxelles, microgreens from our hydroponic gardens, and a red wine reduction that I have been perfecting for 15 years. He set the plate before Perrin with the reverence of a religious offering. The high critic examined the dish from multiple angles as waves of rough texture chased each other across his neck. He cut a small piece, raised it to his mouth, and chewed slowly. The room fell silent. A violent ripple of texture shot across Perrin's neck for exactly 1.3 seconds before he wrestled it back to grit. His eyes widened slightly. His hand trembled as he set down his fork. "This..." He paused, visibly struggling. "The texture is offensively perfect. The flavor profile shows a crude understanding of umami that borders on competence. The reduction is clearly an attempt to mask the inferior quality of your proteins, though it nearly succeeds." Another pause. The rough texture returned for a moment. "It is the best thing your species has produced, which is rather like being the tallest building in a crater." Tony's smile was deadly. "I praise indeed." Before Perrin could respond, Rex wheeled his cart of chaos over. "All right, Space Cadets, time for the main event. Buffalo wings. We've got mild for the weak, medium for the curious, and wild for those who think they're warriors." The lower caste Clovians, who had been standing at the back, crept forward with obvious interest. One of them, braver than the rest, reached for a medium wing. "I wouldn't," Perrin began, but it was too late. The Clovian bit into the wing. Sauce exploded everywhere. The meat fell off the bone. The skin on his neck rippled with textures, a riot of sensation that finally settled on a smoothness so brilliant it was almost reflective. "By the Valash," he whispered. It's righteous," Rex suggested. "Transcendent." Chaos erupted. The lower caste Clovians swarmed the wing cart. Perrin stood froze, watching his subordinates devour the wings with their hands. Their hands! Sauce covering their faces, their necks strobing with shifting textures. "This is anarchy," he muttered. "This is lunch," Rex corrected, offering him a wing. "Come on, your criticalness. One bite. I promise it won't kill you." Perrin looked at the wing like it was a venomous serpent. His skin went through several textures that probably had names like scandalized grit and tempted smoothness. He took the wing. He bit into it. The documentary cut to a new interview with High Critic Perrin, conducted shortly after the banquet. Sauce stained the corner of his mouth. His usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled. "I've made a terrible mistake," he said to the camera. "The humans have discovered something, a force, not a cuisine, something primal." The interviewer asked him to elaborate. "There's a completeness to it. The chicken, prepared both ways. The refined technique of the angry one, the chaotic joy of the loud one. When I taste it, I feel..." He paused, his neck cycling through confused, shifting textures. "I feel as though I'm touching something ancient, something my people have forgotten. It is profoundly unsettling." The scene shifted to the lower caste Clovians. 3 of them crowded into frame, their necks a synchronized display of smooth, reflective skin. "We've never eaten anything like this," one exclaimed. "The high palates always said food should be contemplated, not enjoyed," another added. "But this makes me want to sing," the third chimed in. "Is that normal?" Next was Rex, now wearing a crown made of chicken bones that someone had fashioned for him. "See? The thing about good food is it's democratic. Doesn't matter if you're a high critic or a janitor. Your taste buds don't care about your job title. They just want to party." The interviewer asked about the Clovians' reaction. "Oh, they're hooked. Did you see Perrin try to steal a whole tray? Dude's got it bad. Don't even want to admit it, but he's too proud. His fancy chicken made the high critic's neck go full festival of textures." Tony appeared, trying very hard to look annoyed and failing. "It's about demonstrating that human cuisine can stand alongside any in the galaxy. Although," a small smile crept onto his face. "Did you see his face when he realized he'd gotten sauce on his ceremonial sash? Priceless." Dr. Bellwether met junior activist Idira on the observation lounge, which was really just a room with a slightly larger window. Stars wheeled slowly past, providing a backdrop that would have been romantic if not for the fluorescent lighting and the faint smell of industrial cleaner. "You wanted to speak with me?" Bellwether said, though she had suggested the meeting through carefully coded messages. Idira's neck rippled with a nervous, gritty texture. "You're studying our religion, our history, among other things. You asked about the Valash." "I did." They stood in silence for a moment, each waiting for the other to make the first move in this careful dance. Finally, Idira spoke in a rush. "I don't think the Valash are gods. I know that's heresy, but I've been reading the old texts, the ones from before the third revelation, and they tell a different story. The High Reverends hoard knowledge to maintain control, but it's our history, all of it." Bellwether kept her expression neutral, though inside she vibrated with interest. "What kind of story?" "One where the Valash were just animals, terrible, powerful animals that hunted us. The deification came later, after the Great Peace." "The Great Peace?" "When we finally developed technology sufficient to protect ourselves. Rather than admit we'd been cowering from predators for millennia, our ancestors rewrote history, made the Valash divine, made our fear into worship." Idira's skin had gone smooth, almost translucent. "I could lose everything for telling you this." "Then why are you?" "Because you're an outsider. You can see patterns we've trained ourselves to ignore, and because..." She hesitated, then pulled out a small data pad. "Because I found something in the deep archives. Something about the Valash arriving from the heavens. But the timeline is wrong. It doesn't match our official history." She handed Bellwether the pad. On it were images, fossil records, ancient carvings, proto-Clovian artwork, and in each one, creatures that looked remarkably, shockingly familiar. "These look like..." Bellwether began, then stopped. "I need to check something. My minor was in comparative xenobiology, but this requires the ship's full analysis suite. Do you have access to more detailed anatomical records?" "I can get them, but why?
What do you see?
Bellwether looked at the young Clovian, weighing her options.
I think your Valash and our dinosaurs might be related. More than related. I think they might be the same species, transplanted across the galaxy by someone or something.
Idira's neck went through textures Bellwether hadn't seen before.
That cannot be. The Valash are unique to our world. They're divine,
Bellwether suggested gently.
We're just travelers, like the rest of us.
2 days passed in a blur of cultural exchanges, formal dinners, and what Rex called wing diplomacy. The Clovians couldn't get enough of human chicken, prepared in every way imaginable. Tony had created 12 variations of his ballotine. Rex had gone through so much hot sauce that the ship's quartermaster threatened to ration it. And through it all, Perrin grew increasingly agitated. He's been requesting chicken for every meal, Tony told the documentary crew. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and something he calls fourth meal, which I think he made up just to get more chicken. The interviewer asked if this was a problem.
A problem?
Vemnon's neck flashed with a sharp, gritty texture.
He's forgotten the morning prostrations to the Valash. He's forgotten everything except chicken. It's as if the humans have bewitched him with their crude cuisine.
Meanwhile, in a secluded science lab, Bellwether and Idira worked almost without rest. For 2 days, they barely slept, cross-referencing Clovian fossil data with Earth's paleontological records through the ship's powerful bioanalysis computer. The picture that emerged was impossible to ignore.
Look at this,
Bellwether said, projecting 2 skeletal structures side by side.
On the left, a velociraptor from Earth's Cretaceous period. On the right, a young Valash from your fossil records.
They were nearly identical.
But how?
Idira's skin had gone pale again.
The Valash evolved on our world. They're native. Are they? Your own texts say they descended from the heavens. What if that's literally true? What if some ancient race, seeded both our worlds with the same species? The gardeners, Idira whispered. They are legends, very old legends, about beings who traveled between stars, planting life like seeds. On our Earth, our dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid impact 66 million years ago, all except for one branch that evolved into modern birds.
Bellwether pulled up another image,
including this one, Gallus domesticus. What is that? A chicken. The same animal your delegation has been devouring for 3 days.
Idira's neck went completely smooth, like polished bone.
You mean we've been eating the direct evolutionary descendants of creatures identical to your Valash? Yes.
They stared at each other across the datapad, both understanding the magnitude of what they discovered.
We have to tell them,
Idira said finally.
We do,
Bellwether agreed.
The question is how we tell them without starting an interstellar incident. Or a holy war,
Idira added weakly. Bellwether looked at the data again.
We'll need proof, undeniable, scientific proof that even the High Reverend can't dismiss. And then we find out if the fastest way to interstellar peace really is through their stomachs.
The emergency joint session was called for what the Stellacord's computer cheerfully announced as
0900 hours ship time.
Everyone looked slightly disheveled, except for Tony, whose whites could have survived a nuclear blast and come out pressed.
Dr. Bellwether, the ship's captain said, you indicated this was urgent?
Urgent and significant,
Bellwether replied, setting up her presentation with the calm of someone about to drop a gravitational bomb.
I've made a discovery that affects both our species.
Perrin sat at the Clovian side of the table, his neck cycling through impatient, gritty textures. He'd been pulled away from what Rex had described as a transcendent experience with honey garlic wings.
If this is about dietary requirements, Perrin began, I assure you we've found human cuisine to be Acceptable. Acceptable? Rex whispered loudly.
Buddy, you literally cried when you ate my Korean barbecue wings yesterday.
That was the capsaicin. That was joy.
Gentlemen,
Bellwether interrupted.
if I could have your attention.
The lights dimmed. The holographic display came to life.
I want to discuss
Bellwether began.
the curious case of similar evolutionary paths, or, as I've come to suspect, something far more interesting.
She brought up the first slide, a timeline of Earth stretching back 230 million years.
This is Earth during what we call the Triassic period. The age of dinosaurs was just beginning.
The image shifted to show various dinosaurs.
For over 160 million years, these creatures dominated our planet. Then, 66 million years ago, an asteroid impact caused a mass extinction. The dinosaurs died out. Mostly.
Mostly? Irreverent Vemnon leaned forward.
Some survived. Specifically the theropod dinosaurs, the two-legged predators. Over millions of years, they evolved.
The display showed the gradual transition from dinosaur to bird.
They became smaller, developed more efficient metabolisms, and eventually became these.
A picture of a modern bird appeared.
Fascinating,
Perrin said in a tone suggesting it was anything but.
But what does Earth's prehistoric history have to do with junior archivist Idira has been helping me access your historical records?
Bellwether continued. Idira's neck immediately went gritty with anxiety.
Specifically, records concerning the arrival of the Valash.
Vemnon stood abruptly. Those records are sacred. They are not for...
They describe the Valash descending from the heavens in fire,
Bellwether said calmly.
Approximately 230 million years ago, by your calendar, the same time dinosaurs appeared on Earth.
The room went very quiet.
Furthermore,
Bellwether continued, bringing up new images.
When we examine the skeletal structure of your Valash,
two skeletons appeared side by side. One labeled Valash, the other Dromaeosaurus. They were almost identical. This is blasphemy, Vemnon whispered.
the gardeners, a theoretical ancient race, appear to have seeded multiple worlds with the same species. On Earth, they became dinosaurs and eventually birds. On your homeworld, without an extinction event, they became your Valash.
She paused, letting this sink in.
Which brings us to our current situation.
She brought up a new image.
This is Gallus domesticus, the common chicken, a direct descendant of theropod dinosaurs, specifically the same family as velociraptors and, by extension, your Valash.
The image shifted to a comparison. A Valash skeleton, a velociraptor, and a chicken skeleton, all scaled to the same size. The bone structure was undeniably similar. You're saying, Perrin's voice was barely above a whisper, that your chickens
are the evolutionary cousins of your gods. Yes.
The silence that followed could have been measured in geological epochs. Then, Perrin looked down at his plate, where the remains of this morning's chicken and waffles sat in syrupy glory. The skin on his neck cycled through every texture imaginable, flashed with patterns of grit and glass, then settled on a mottled, uneven surface of profound distress. I've been eating gods? Technically, Rex said helpfully. You've been eating their great times a million grandkids. Don't get hung up on the 66 million years of paperwork. For all practical purposes, you've been eating your gods with buffalo sauce. Perrin fainted. Vemnon started screaming in a language the translator gave up on and simply rendered as theological panic. 3 other Clovians joined him, creating a harmony of horror. And in the chaos, one of the lower caste Clovians picked up an abandoned chicken tender, dipped it in ranch, and took a thoughtful bite. Still delicious, he said.
In retrospect,
Dr. Bellwether told the documentary crew, sipping her tea with the satisfaction of a spectacularly confirmed hypothesis,
I probably could have broke the news more gently.
The interviewer asked if she regretted the timing.
Regret? No. The truth would have come out eventually. You don't get to be a xenoculturist without bending a few rules. Their religion was based on fear, a relic of a time before they had technology. It was holding them back.
She paused, considering.
Still, I probably should have waited until after Perrin finished his breakfast. Watching someone have a theological crisis while covered in maple syrup was memorable.
The scene changed to High Reverend Vemnon, who looked as if he'd aged several years in the past hour.
Everything we'd believed, everything we built our society upon, it's all...
He stopped, unable to continue. The interviewer offered him water. He stared at it suspiciously.
Is this made from gods too?
Next was Perrin, who had been sedated and was now somewhat coherent.
The flavor,
he said distantly.
It all makes sense now. The perfection of the chicken, the way it called to something deep within us. We were eating our own divinity. We were communing with the sacred through buffalo sauce.
He paused.
Do you have any more Korean barbecue wings?
Rex was practically glowing with vindication. So let me get this straight. Not only did I get an entire alien civilization addicted to wings, but I got them addicted to their own gods? That's got to be worth a space Michelin star. The conference room had been cleared of all food, a necessary precaution given that several Clovians had started panic eating the moment they'd recovered from their fainting spells. High Reverend Vemnon stood at one end of the table, clutching a ceremonial spork that apparently held deep religious significance.
The texts are clear, he said, his voice hollow. To consume the flesh of the Valash is the ultimate blasphemy. We have committed sins that cannot be absolved. We have devoured the divine.
He raised the spork toward his throat.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Rex vaulted over the table, an impressive feat considering he carried a basket of chicken nuggets. He plucked the spork from Vemnon's hand with the casual ease of someone used to disarming kitchen disputes.
Nobody's doing anything dramatic with the ceremonial cutlery, okay? You don't understand, Vemnon said. We have eaten our gods. We have digested divinity. We have had a really good meal, Rex suggested, holding up a nugget. Look, I get it. Finding out your gods are related to chickens is rough. But you know what? These little guys are delicious. And maybe that's the point.
Vemnon stared at him.
The point? Yeah, maybe your gods wanted you to enjoy life a little. Ever think of that? Maybe they came to our world, evolved into these crispy little flavor bombs, and then we brought them to you as, I don't know, a gift.
That's the stupidest theology I've ever heard, Tony said from the doorway.
Is it?
Rex asked, warming to his theme.
Think about it. What's more divine? Something you're too scared to even look at, or something that brings you genuine joy? These Valash of yours sound terrifying. But chickens? Chickens make people happy. They're accessible, they're
covered in 11 herbs and spices, Tony suggested sarcastically.
Exactly.
Rex thrust the nugget toward Vemnon.
Maybe the real revelation is that divinity isn't about fear. It's about connection. It's about sharing something good with others. It's about...
Flavor Town, Perrin said weakly from his chair. His neck had stabilized into a confused but interested grainy texture.
Now you're getting it, Rex grinned. Look, I'm not saying you should abandon your whole religion. I'm just saying maybe expand it a little. Add a chapter about the divine nature of buffalo sauce.
John looked at the nugget, then at the spork in Rex's other hand. He watched as one of the lower caste Clovians hesitantly took a nugget from the basket and ate. Then Vemnon looked back at the nugget in front of him.
This is insane, he said. Try the honey mustard.
Slowly, as if reaching for something that might explode, Vemnon took the nugget. He dipped it carefully in the sauce.
He took the smallest possible bite.
He paused, searching for words. It's actually quite pleasant.
And that,
Dr. Bellwether said, entering with a stack of documents,
is what I propose we focus on. The biological and cultural connections, not the theological implications. Your Valash and our chickens share a common ancestor. That makes us, in a strange way, connected. United by the gardener's ancient seeding project. United by chicken, Idira added. There are worse foundations for an alliance.
Perrin stood slowly, his dignity somewhat undermined by the saw stain on his ceremonial sash.
You're suggesting we simply accept this? That we've been eating our gods' evolutionary cousins and we should be happy about it? I'm suggesting, Bellwether said carefully, that we use this as an opportunity. Your people have spent millennia fearing the Valash. Our people have spent millennia eating their cousins. Maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe understanding that these creatures are not unique, purely divine, but are part of a greater galactic tapestry could help your people grow beyond fear.
Plus, Rex added, think of the trade opportunities. We've got hundreds of chicken recipes. You've got a whole planet of people who've never experienced the joy of Nashville hot chicken. This could be huge.
You want to build an alliance on
poultry? Vemnon asked.
Humanity has built civilizations on less, Tony said.
Trust me,
I'm French. We once had a revolution partly about bread.
The room fell silent as the Clovians considered this.
Perrin's neck cycled through thoughtful, grainy textures. Vemnon's remained smooth but had gained hints of a warmer sheen. The lower caste Clovians already eyed the nugget basket with obvious interest. Finally, Perrin spoke. We would need guarantees, cultural protections. The Valash must remain respected, even if their divine status is reconsidered. We still have orthodox factions on the homeworld who will see this as a declaration of war. Of course, Bellwether agreed. We can manage the narrative together. And we would want exclusive rights to certain recipes, he added, his neck flickering with a rough, acquisitive texture. That Korean barbecue sauce, specifically.
Rex gasped. That's my signature, Tony elbowed him.
We can negotiate.
And, Vemnon said slowly, we would need help explaining this to our people. The revelation that our gods are edible will not be received well.
We could start slow, Idira suggested. Introduce it as a scientific discovery first. The theological implications can come later, after people have had time to adjust.
And taste the wings, one of the lower caste Clovians added hopefully.
Vemnon shot him a look, but his neck had shifted to an almost amused smoothness. This is unprecedented, Perrin said. We came here to judge your culture, to determine if humanity was worthy of joining the galactic community. Instead, you've shattered our entire worldview with chicken wings.
So, is that a yes?
Rex asked. Perrin looked at his fellow Clovians, at the humans, at the nugget in Vemnon's hand. His neck went through one final, spectacular surge of textures before settling on a warm, accepting smoothness. That is a yes, but I want on record that this is the strangest alliance in galactic history.
The most delicious one, too,
Rex grinned. Tony rolled his eyes, but a smile crept onto his face. I'll start preparing the formal menu for the treaty signing. Make sure to include those little chicken sliders, Perrin said quickly, for ceremonial purposes. Ceremonial purposes, Bellwether repeated dryly. Of course. As the room erupted into discussions of trade agreements, recipe exchanges, and theological reforms, Idira sidled up to Bellwether. Do you think this will work? She asked quietly. Can two civilizations really bond over chicken? Bellwether watched Rex enthusiastically explaining the perfect wing-to-sauce ratio, while Tony and Perrin argued about flavor profiles with the passion of intellectual equals. Stranger things have happened, she said. Though, Admittedly, not many. The treaty signing took place a week later. The document itself was a masterpiece of diplomatic language, establishing a formal alliance without once mentioning that humanity had been feeding the Clovians their own gods. The section on culinary exchange took up 53 pages, with subsections on sauce rights, preparation methods, and what Rex had successfully lobbied to call the Flavor Accords.
This is a historical moment,
the captain of the Stellar Accord announced to the assembled delegates.
The first formal alliance between humanity and another spacefaring species.
Built on a foundation of buffalo sauce,
someone muttered.
I heard that, Rex called out. And yes it is. You're welcome, Galaxy.
The signing itself was ceremonial, with formal poses for the cameras and dramatic flourishes with official styluses. The real celebration came after, when the tables were loaded with what the menu called a fusion of worlds, but what everyone knew was just an excuse to eat more chicken. Perrin stood with Tony at the serving station, both of them observing the mingling of their species. Your brother is teaching our junior staff something called the proper way to ranch, Perrin noted. And your people are teaching ours that food can be meditation, Tony replied, though I draw the line at their 30-minute pre-meal contemplation. 15 minutes, 5, 10. And we include your wine pairing suggestion in our religious texts. They shook on it. The party continued late into the ship's artificial night. At one point, someone brought out a karaoke machine, which led to the surreal experience of watching High Critic Perrin perform what he called a traditional Clovian funeral dirge, but which sounded suspiciously like Sweet Caroline with different words. As the evening wound down, Rex found himself standing next to his brother on the observation deck looking out at the stars.
So, Rex said, we did it. We brought peace to the galaxy through the power of chicken.
We committed theological vandalism and somehow got thanked for it, Tony corrected.
Tomato.
They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. You know, Tony said eventually, your wings aren't entirely terrible. Rex nearly dropped his beer.
Was that a compliment?
It was an observation. Don't let it go to your head.
Too late. I'm putting it on my business cards. Rex Dubois makes wings that aren't entirely terrible, according to his Michelin-starred brother.
Tony sighed, but there was a fondness in it. We make a good team.
The best. Technique and soul. Refinement and chaos.
Coq au vin and buffalo wings.
That's the worst metaphor I've ever heard.
It's the most accurate one. They clinked bottles, watching the stars wheel past.
Think they'll ever get over the whole eating their gods thing?
Rex asked. Probably not, but they'll learn to live with it. We've been doing cognitive dissonance since we figured out fire. We'll teach them.
Through the power of flavor?
Through the power of not thinking too hard about things that taste good. Rex raised his bottle.
To not thinking too hard.
Tony raised his. To chicken diplomacy.
To the weirdest peace treaty in galactic history.
To making it work anyway. They drank, and the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the strange ways that civilizations found common ground.